He was just a mechanic. He lived away from the eyes of the world, in a small workshop as if he had made a silent pact with his past. Until one snowy night, a wounded woman knocked on his door. She wasn't speaking, but her eyes were screaming, and with her came a secret growing in the silence of death. Now he faced a choice, to run or to protect. But sometimes, the most ordinary-looking people end up fighting the greatest battles. This is the story of the silenced. And the silence that began that night turned into a revolution. The night felt like the weight of darkness had been dropped onto the ground. The air was cold, but Daniel didn't feel it. He had pulled his old, torn jacket tightly around his shoulders and was trying to add wood to the stove in the small room of his workshop. The stove, full of ashes, was burning as if it had given up just like Daniel. He had worked on 3 cars during the day, but his earnings wouldn't even come close to covering tomorrow's bills. That's why he did other jobs too. He fixed old radiators, worked on a neighbor's generator, and sometimes he just listened because people often saw him not as a mechanic, but as a box of silence. Maybe that's why they liked him. He never asked questions. Just as he bent over the stove, the sound of an engine outside startled him. It was well past midnight. No one came around here at this hour. He peeked outside through the curtain. The headlights from a car were dancing in the white darkness from afar. After a short while, the headlights went out, but the engine noise was still nearby. Then came the sound of a door slamming not once, but twice. The footsteps were heavy, hesitant. When Daniel opened the door, he saw a woman barely standing in front of him. Her hair was a mess, and there were dried blood stains on her face. The wind seemed to be blowing through her thin coat. Behind her, an old car was parked, its doors open and the interior light flickering. Without saying a word, she whispered, "Please, help me," and then collapsed right there. Daniel didn't hesitate for a second. He grabbed her under her arms and carried her inside. This wasn't an ordinary night, he realized now. He laid her down on an old chair next to the stove. She was breathing, but it was uneven. There was a mark on her back, bruises on her ribs. These injuries were too systematic to have come from just an accident. "What's your name?" he asked gently. The woman barely opened her eyes and whispered just one word, "Leah." Daniel wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, brought her some water, but the only thing echoing in his mind was that single word, Leah, a name he'd never heard but somehow felt familiar. The woman couldn't speak, but her silence was loud. Who was she? Why was she like this? And why did it seem like someone had tried to silence her? That night, Leah fell into Daniel's life like a spark falling from the sky. But Daniel didn't know yet. Leah wasn't just a refugee. She was carrying a secret from her past, a secret that was now threatening the lives of others. This secret wouldn't only destroy Leah, it would also tear down the walls of silence Daniel had built for years. It wasn't morning yet, but Daniel was awake. In fact, he hadn't slept at all. He sat at the edge of the chair, listening to Leah's steady but shallow breaths. The bruise on her forehead had faded a little, but there was still a fear in her face. Even with her eyes closed, it seemed like she was trying to escape. As Daniel turned to put water in the kettle again, his mind wandered through the weight of the past. He too had once run away, in a different story, but hidden in a similar silence. People didn't talk about their pasts, because some wounds didn't bleed when they were told, but when they were left silent. Daniel had once had a family. He and his wife had a small house, filled with dreams full of hope. That was until the day the people he trusted stabbed him in the back. A false accusation, a court ruling, a job loss, and then silence. The garage had become a sanctuary for him, no longer just a job. He had sworn never to trust anyone again. When Leah opened her eyes in the early hours of the morning, she didn't immediately understand where she was. Then, the sound of the stove, the crackling wood, and the silent movements of a man helped her mind settle. You saved me," she said in a faint voice. Daniel didn't turn his head as he replied, "Not yet." Leah fell silent and looked around. Her mouth was dry, her hands were shaking. "If they find me, they'll silence us both." she murmured. Those words seemed to change the air in the room and slow the flow of time. Daniel's eyes finally turned directly to Leah. "Who?" he asked. "Who will silence us?" Leah didn't answer, but the color of her fear, it started to spill out from her eyes, no longer hidden in her words. Then, a sound came from outside, a soft click, followed by footsteps. Daniel suddenly got up and silently moved toward the window. When he slightly parted the curtain, he saw a shadow moving in the darkness. A man with a lantern, his face hidden, but his steps were sure. This was not a place someone would visit by accident. He was looking for someone, or something. Daniel turned back to Leah. "Are you waiting for someone?" Leah's face went pale. "Them. They've already found me," she said, her eyes wide. "We need to hide." Daniel didn't have a gun. No security camera, no alarm system, just a rotten door and a few iron keys. But when he saw Leah's panic, he didn't hesitate and headed straight to the back of the garage. Behind the old oil drums, there was a hidden compartment. That's where he used to store his papers, a few old belongings. Now, it was their only chance at survival. As he pushed Leah inside, her eyes were filled with tears. "I need to hide, but I'm putting you in danger too," she whispered. Daniel leaned down and looked into her eyes. "You fell here tonight. This is your place too now. Don't worry. Whoever comes, they'll deal with me first." The hinges of the front door creaked. The shadow was now right in front of the door. The door wasn't knocked. It was just gently opened. Cold air slipped inside first, followed by a tall, slim man. He wore a dark coat with the collar turned up, and his hat was pulled down to his eyes. His steps were silent, but they weren't aimless. He scanned the room not like a detective, but like a hunter. His eyes were as calm as a predator's. A table, an old stove, a few keys hanging on the wall. And Daniel. Daniel stood facing him, not like a mechanic, but like a waiting sentry. As soon as the shadow stepped in, he said, "Car repairs aren't done here at night." There was no fear or politeness in his voice, just a line sharp and defined. The stranger laughed softly, nodded slightly. "True, but there was someone here asking for help, wasn't there?" His eyes momentarily passed over Daniel and landed on the blanket near the stove. Daniel stepped forward, blocking the view. "Help? The only thing you need right now is to leave," he said, his voice growing firmer. The man took a piece of paper from his pocket. It looked like a photograph. It flashed in the light for a moment. "Have you seen this woman?" he asked. Daniel didn't even look. "No," he said. "The only thing I've seen is an uninvited guest." The man nodded slightly, then locked his eyes with Daniel's. "What about the people looking for this woman? Haven't you seen them?" The words changed the air in the room. An invisible threat seemed to rise, warmer than even the flames from the stove. Daniel's face tightened, but he didn't say a word. The stranger took a few steps, stopping in the middle of the garage. He scanned the room once more. Then, almost to himself, he muttered, "Some people like to help. Others are just curious. But no matter what, knowing certain things comes at a cost." As he was about to turn and leave, his eyes returned to Daniel. "If you haven't seen anyone tonight, I hope no one sees you in the morning." The last words weren't hostile, but slow, deep, and choking. The man turned toward the door and walked out. The door closed quietly behind him. No sound of the lock turning. Maybe it was a message this wasn't over. Daniel immediately moved to the back, to the compartment where Leah was hiding. He opened the door slowly. Leah had her eyes closed, holding her breath. Daniel bent down. "He's gone. But this won't stay here," he said. Leah slowly raised her head. There were no tears in her eyes, only guilt. I put you in danger," she said, trembling. Daniel furrowed his brows. "This is no good for anyone now. I need to know what's going on. Who are these people?" Leah closed her eyes. A long silence followed. Then, slowly, with a clear voice, she spoke. "I was an internal auditor for a company. I was going through financial records. And then, I found something, accidentally. Millions of dollars in black funds, fake partnerships, secret deals with the government. My name wasn't on the files, but my signature was, and someone wanted to silence me. When the first threat letter came, I ran. Now, I have nowhere left to run. As Daniel looked at Leah, it was as if he wasn't seeing a stranger, but the shadows from his own past. A man trying to live outside the system, now being pulled toward the rotten heart of it. A silent mechanic, no longer just a witness but an accomplice in a crime. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep for a long time. Outside, the snow kept falling. But inside, a battle was beginning. And this time, there wasn't just a broken engine to fix, there were shattered lives, silenced truths, and a danger that was drawing closer every second. By morning, the sky had turned gray, but Daniel's mind was darker still. Leah's words echoed in his ears. An internal auditor, illegal financial transactions, a witness who wanted to be silenced. And now that witness was in his garage. Daniel had spent years unseen, in the corner, in silence, keeping to himself. But Leah's voice was now not only in his ears, it was in his veins. If anything happened to her, he couldn't just watch it like some accident. He dialed a number on the landline in his small garage, one he hadn't called in years. Took a long time for someone to answer. Finally, a cautious but elderly voice came through. Daniel. Silence. Then Daniel spoke. I owe you a favor. I don't know if you need someone now, but I do. The voice on the other end changed. What happened? Daniel spoke in short, sharp sentences. The woman sighed. If old files get opened, everyone gets dusty, Daniel. But send the address. Half an hour later, an old Jeep pulled up in front of the garage. A woman with graying hair and eyes that still seemed alert, like a soldier, stepped out. Her name was Mara. She had worked in intelligence, then retired, choosing to live on her own. With Mara's arrival, the air in the room shifted. Leah didn't trust her at first. There was a cold, questioning look in her eyes. But Daniel spoke a single sentence. Buy me time. That's enough. Leah lowered her head. Mara wanted to see the files. Leah pulled out a crumpled few papers from her bag. Code names, bank statements, transfers. Mara's eyes narrowed. This isn't just financial fraud. This is a state-backed smokescreen. She frowned. And you, Leah, are standing in the middle of this stage. At that moment, the sound of an engine outside froze everyone. A vehicle wasn't approaching, it was already there. It was silently waiting. The only thing visible through the window was the shadow of a black SUV parked in the darkness. Mara immediately leaned against the wall. We're being followed, she said. Daniel quickly moved to put Leah back into the hidden compartment. But this time, Leah resisted. No, she said. I can't keep hiding. Running isn't enough. Daniel looked into her eyes. This isn't running. This is surviving. As Mara hid Leah inside, Daniel stepped outside. He had no weapon, just courage and a bundle of keys. The men stepping out of the car were both in suits, their cold stares piercing. One stepped forward. Mr. Daniel, he said, emphasizing his name. Is Leah here? He wasn't waiting for an answer. The question was asked as a threat. Daniel replied, This is a garage, not a detective agency. The man smiled. Interesting, because that woman is wanted everywhere. The ones hiding her, too. His sentence hung in the air. The threat was like a bullet fired into the air unheard, but felt. Daniel took a step forward. You're not after her. You're after silencing the truth. The other man pulled a document from his jacket. It looked like an official search warrant, but the signatures were digital, not ink. Mara silently locked the door inside. She was preparing to get Leah out another way. Daniel needed to buy time. If you want to search, go ahead. But here, you'll only find old cars, rusty keys, and rotting hopes. Their eyes locked. The men hesitated for a moment. Maybe they were waiting for another order. Maybe they didn't want to leave any trace. But one of them stepped closer to Daniel, whispering, That woman is not just a witness. She's on the list. Daniel didn't understand. The man continued, She's on the list of those who need to be silenced. Those words shifted something in Daniel. This wasn't just about protecting a woman anymore. It was a battle to defend the silenced. And for the first time, a mechanic wasn't just planning to fix engines but to fix a broken system. As the night wore on, there was a quiet urgency in the garage. Mara had spread old maps out, drawing routes, while Leah was stuffing papers and documents into a bag. Daniel was outside, checking the engine of the old minibus. Everything was being done quietly as if the walls had ears. No one was speaking loudly, but everyone had the same thought. If we don't leave tonight, tomorrow, maybe none of us will be here. Leah turned to Mara. Let me go alone. Daniel has nothing to do with this. They'll put him on the list too. Mara shook her head. It's too late now. The moment he hid you, he crossed to the other side. For them, this is just a math equation. Anyone who protects you is a danger. Leah lowered her head. Then this equation will cost someone their life. When Daniel came back inside, his face wasn't covered in grease, but in darkness. The engine's good, but even if it holds up for the long haul, I don't know if we can. Mara nodded him over, showing him the map. We'll take the back roads north. After that, I'll hand you over to someone else. This job will be out of my hands, but Leah will be safe. Daniel stared at her for a long time. Why are you helping, Mara? Mara smiled, but the smile was bitter. I used to be a Leah, but no one hid me. Now it's my turn. Once preparations were complete, everyone gathered their bags. Leah paused for a moment at the door. What if they find us? She asked. Daniel answered quietly. Then I'll be the first one to speak, not you. That sentence felt like a vow. As the minibus pulled away, the night was quiet, but inside, it carried a storm. Only the trail of headlights and a glimmer of hope remained. The first few kilometers passed without incident, but Mara's eyes were constantly on the rearview mirror. After a few turns, Daniel suddenly slammed on the brakes. There's a light behind us. It's getting closer. Mara lowered her head. We're being followed. Leah panicked. How did they find us? At that moment, a voice came from the radio in Mara's pocket. Stop. If you resist, you will be harmed. Daniel immediately swerved the vehicle onto a forest road. The minibus bounced as stones danced in the headlights. Leah held onto her seat. Mara pulled a gun from her bag on the back seat. This was the last resort, but I think it's come early. As Daniel went down a narrow hill, one of the tires got stuck in the mud. The minibus couldn't move. The engine screamed, but the wheel wouldn't turn. At that moment, the SUV behind them turned off its lights and silently approached. Two silhouettes appeared in the reflection of the headlights. Daniel was about to step out when Mara stopped him. No, I'll go. She opened the door, tucked the gun into her belt, but walked out with her hands open. There are only 3 of us here. Let them go. One of the armed men laughed. Your name's on the list now, Mara. The other was quieter, but had raised his weapon. Just as a confrontation was about to happen, something unexpected occurred. The other door of the minibus opened. Leah stepped out. Her hands were raised. Take me. Let them go. Mara shouted angrily. What are you doing? Leah's eyes were filled with tears. I'm tired of hiding. If leaving will save them, then I'll go. As the armed men approached, one was talking on the phone. Then he nodded. Take her. Let the others go. Just as Leah was about to take a step, a hand grabbed her arm. It was Daniel. No, we started this together. You don't leave until it's over. But Leah looked into his eyes. This isn't your fight. Daniel shook his head. It is now. And in that moment, the sound of a gunshot cut through the air. Mara fell to the ground. Everything froze. Guns were raised, shouting started. Daniel ran to Mara. She'd been shot in the shoulder, but she was still conscious. It's not over, Mara said. You get her out. Daniel's eyes turned to Leah. In that moment, there were 2 choices. Surrender or stop hiding forever. And Daniel, with a courage he had never known, made his decision. As the sound of the gunshot echoed, time seemed to stop. Mara had collapsed to the ground, but she was still conscious. When Daniel leaned over her, despite the blood trickling from her lips, she squinted and spoke almost in a whisper. "Let me go. Get her out. Time's running out." Something inside Daniel broke in that moment. He had always been the silent observer, watching everything happen around him. But now he had become someone rising to change fate. Turning to Leah with resolve, he said, "We're leaving this place, but this time we won't just run. We'll speak." Leah didn't understand at first. "We'll speak?" she repeated in a low voice. Daniel looked into her eyes. "If we just run, someone else will be silenced. But if we speak loud enough for everyone to hear, we'll stop them. Not you." And at that moment, the plan began to take shape. Daniel took the small recorder from Mara's backpack. He combined all the documents Leah had hidden, the voice notes on her phone, and the files. Then Daniel called an old contact, a journalist he had worked with in the past. His name was Jonas. He was one of the rare people Daniel still managed to connect with. At first, Jonas hesitated on the phone, but when he saw the documents, his tone shifted. If this is real, it's not just a company, it's a dirty network working inside the government," he said. Daniel simply replied, "It's real, and it needs to spread." Jonas worked through the night and told Daniel that by the first light of morning, they would be ready for a special broadcast. With one condition, Leah had to go live. Daniel turned his eyes to Leah. She was silent for a long time. Then she slowly nodded. "If this is the final step, I'll take it, not with fear, but by facing it." In the early hours of the morning, they arrived at a warehouse-turned-temporary studio. Jonas and his small team were ready. The camera, microphone, and internet connection were all set up. As Daniel dressed Leah in a vest, his hands trembled. Leah, however, looked calm for the first time. "I couldn't speak for years, but this time silence would be betrayal," she said. When the broadcast began, Daniel waited off camera. Leah looked into the lens. "My name is Leah, and I will no longer be silenced," she started. Then, one by one, she presented the files, the voice recordings, and the documents. Names, accounts, connections, each hit the audience like a slap to the face. And finally, Leah said, "Today, I represent not only myself, but everyone who has been silenced." The broadcast exploded. In the first 10 minutes, thousands of people tuned in. Social media went ablaze. The hashtag #LeahSpeaks topped the global trends within hours. And as that happened, Daniel heard a vehicle approaching outside. They were here again, he thought. But this time, there were other vehicles as well. The press, the police, the people. Daniel walked to the door. One of the newcomers showed an official ID. "We'll do our part. These people can no longer hide in the shadows." The next day, the national media headlines screamed like sirens. "Woman speaks. State-supported scandal exposed. The voices of the silenced. A mechanic and a witness fight in silence." Daniel and Leah, the heroes of truth. Mara was taken to the hospital and started treatment. For Daniel and Leah, a new life began. But this life came with more than just safety, it came with responsibility on their shoulders. Leah gave her statement. Daniel testified. And together, they created space for all the silenced voices. Leah established a foundation justice for the silenced. Daniel still runs his garage. But now, it is not just a place for fixing cars, it's where broken hopes are also repaired. Because sometimes, a man is not just a mechanic. And sometimes, a woman is not just a witness, she is the beginning of a revolution.